there, devoted geeks. My name is Ashely, and I'm here with a spooktacular review of one of the most awesomely bad vampire films you've probably never seen, 2012's Vamps. Now, this film is described in a one-sentence summary found on Google as the following. Blood-sucking party girls find their destinies at stake, that's S-T-A-K-E, when one of them falls for the son of a vampire hunter and the other encounters a long-ago love. Now, Vamps is brought to us by the director of Clueless, Amy Heckerling, and it's a 2012 film starring Alicia Silverstone, Kristen Ritter, Sigourney Weaver, Wallace Shawn, and Richard Lewis. Now, this film, based on its summary, is exactly what you think it is. It is a vampirical rom-com. It is meant to be funny at times, unlike Twilight, where you are just laughing at its sheer ridiculousness. Now, this movie definitely is pretty darn bad, but I think that's why I enjoy it as much as I do. The film stars Alicia Silverstone and Kristen Ritter as our title blood-sucking party girls, named Goody and Stacy. Alicia Silverstone plays the former Goody, who became a vampire back in the year 1841. Stacy is fairly new to the vampire life, becoming one in the early 90s. Goody teaches Stacy all about being a vampire, and Stacy teaches Goody about keeping up with the times and retaining their youthful vibes. Now, this movie starts off pretty ordinarily. We're exploring their day-to-day, what they're doing in their nightlife, between going to school and work and clubbing. Now, these two vampires, in order to afford their Manhattan apartment, they actually work as exterminators, and they are actually vegetarian vampires. They decide to abstain from human blood and get their sustenance from animals. And because they're exterminators, most of their sustenance comes from the vermin that they exterminate. And there's a pretty creepy scene early on where the two vampires simply shove a straw into this vermin and suck its blood. And given how corny and cheeseball this scene is, it kind of sets the tone for the entirety of the film. A major subplot that happens throughout the film is these two vampires and their cohorts in the greater Manhattan area. They belong to a group called Sanguines Anonymous, and they do everything that they can to preserve their traditions and also protect humankind and abstain from human blood. And this group, they start getting jury summons and IRS audits, and they're called out during the daytime, and they're really starting to get concerned that they've been found out. And they do a little bit of an investigation to figure out what's going on, and you find out behind the scenes that the modern day Van Helsing is someone who is working for the Department of Homeland Security and using the Patriot Act to find out information about these undead forms. So he is the one that's arranging all of the jury summons and IRS audits during the daytime to kind of pull them out from the safety of their coffins and their apartments. This modern day Van Helsing, you later find out in the film, is the father of a young man that Stacy starts dating in college. And these two are incredibly smitten. Her romantic interest is played by Dan Stevens, and the only context that I have for this character is I can only place him from 2017's Beauty and the Beast, where he plays a CGI beast. So that's all I know about the actor, but he does a pretty good job of being charming and having a really sweet Romeo and Juliet relationship, because his father's a Van Helsing, he's a Van Helsing, and he's with a vampire. So it's a very interesting relationship that they have, and ultimately they do find themselves in a precarious situation, and they're trying their best to move forward and you find out in the film that there is actually a way to reverse vampirism, and the way to do it is you actually have to kill your stem. Now, their stem is a man-hungry, blood-sucking party girl. She truly would be the blood-sucking party girl in this film, and their stem, Cicerus, is hysterically played by Sigourney Weaver. How she ever got asked to join this film is beyond me, because she is one of the funniest characters in this entire film, because she is just over the top in her mannerisms and how she is as a vampire. She just does not have any regard for human life if it doesn't give her something, if there's not something in it for her. So she roams around the world having trivial romances with men and does whatever she can to fulfill her hunger for blood. So they're trying to resist, and you find out that you can reverse vampirism by killing your stem, but what ends up happening is you actually revert to your true chronological age. So that's an interesting subplot in the film. I have to take a moment to comment on the Van Helsing who is working for Homeland Security. He is played by Wallace Shawn, the voice of Rex, Vicini from The Princess Bride, Mr. Hall from Clueless. He is just so good in this over-top, zany version of Van Helsing, who is power-hungry and just trying to involve himself in any instance where there's a vampire sighting. He even goes so far in one scene where he disguises himself as a Time Warner cable guy, invades a vampire's apartment, draws the blinds, takes him out of his coffin, holds him up to the window, and the vampire turns to ash. He is just obsessed with his legacy and doing whatever he can to stop the vampire threat in New York. Another thing that I should mention about this film is there is another low-key romance, the romance from the past, a long ago love, between the Alicia Silverstone character and her former love portrayed by Richard Lewis. You find out that Goody, for the most part, once she became a vampire, she kept to herself. She didn't really entangle herself in the lives of humans around her, but she slipped up in the 60s when she met this character played by Richard Lewis. She was really interested in the messages that he had to say, and she really found herself in a whirlwind romance with him, but then ultimately realized, because he was involved in politics and he was an outspoken activist, that she wanted to give him the opportunity to find a real love, because it wasn't fair to him. But there's a scene in the film where he stumbles upon her, and there's scenes later in the film where he ultimately discovers her true identity, and there's some crazy things that happen throughout the film between the two. You find out that he becomes a lawyer for the ACLU, and he has a wife who is suffering from cancer, and she does everything she can to be a supportive friend. She knows that no matter what, she will always love him, but knowing that he is not for her because he found someone that he will spend the rest of his natural life with. Now, there are some elements in this film that I find incredibly cringeworthy, but there are some elements of this film that I'm not too comfortable with, but for the most part, it is ridiculous fun, and I will say it definitely is one of the more awesomely bad. If you like Clueless, if you like comedies, if you like silly, ridiculous movies, you probably will really enjoy Vamps. All things aside, if you can get past some of the language that's used in the film and some of the sexual situations in the film, it is rated PG-13, so I wouldn't recommend it to all audiences, but if you have a good sense of discernment and you're not bothered by some language, some sexual situations that are a little questionable, if you can get past that, I think you'll enjoy Vamps. It is an interesting movie. There's a lot of references. It is very much akin to the style of Clueless because it is made by the same director, Kristen Ritter and Alicia Silverstone play off each other incredibly well. It's believable, their friendship, their camaraderie that they've had over the last 2 decades. Sigourney Weaver is an absolute delight as this STEM vampire who really just marches to the beat of her own drum. Wallace Shawn as this bumbling Van Helsing. Dan Stevens is a delight, even though his character, honestly, I had to look up his name because I couldn't remember it. His name is Joey Van Helsing. He's interesting enough. And there's quite a few side characters in this zany film. There's some cameos, people pop up, and it's pretty interesting. Some of my favorite scenes came from their meeting with the Sanguine Anonymous group and the random things that would happen when they were working on the job. But there's a lot of vampire tropes in this movie, and it makes fun of said tropes. So if you're interested in seeing one of the most awesomely bad vampire movies that you've never heard of, take a look and go see 2012's Vamps. It is available to rent on Amazon Prime Video. I highly recommend it. Just be aware of the language and the sexual situations. Otherwise, I think you'll be in for a very good laugh at probably one of the worst horror rom-coms. If there are more than one horror rom-com. I'm not sure, but happy watching, devoted geeks. Remember, you're loved. I hope you enjoyed this spooktacular review.